Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is Billy Brandt and Colin Camber. On this week's show, we're going to dive into UFC New Jersey and pick the 4 main card fights for the card. And we're also going to go over a host of headlines, including the much beleaguered UFC 196 card coming up in a couple weeks for Las Vegas. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. He's Billy Brandt. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21. How's it going today, Billy?
I'm doing good, man. We got a lot of stuff that happened.
All right, Colin Camper, he runs our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. How's it going today, Colin?
Rather well, considering everything that's been happening.
All right, let's start out first with the 2 big headlines of the week, but no bigger than the whole story here of UFC 196, and this is like a snowball effect here. So first, Cain Velasquez pulls out with an injury. The UFC tabs the guy who was supposed to face the winner of that fight between Velasquez and Verdum, Stipe Miocic. All seems fine in the world. Stipe gets his title shot. They still save the main event of UFC 196. But about 24 hours later, Fabricio Verdum then goes, nah, you know what? I'm kind of banged up. I'm not going to fight now. So then he drops out of the fight. Then there was rumors that John Jones would fight if it was for the actual heavyweight title, not an interim title, but the UFC was not really about to strip Fabricio Verdum with having no other previous injury problems before, and obviously this would be his first attempt at defending his heavyweight title, so it didn't look like that was going to happen. So instead, the new main event of UFC 196 will be what was the co-main event, as former welterweight champion Johnny Hendricks takes on Stephen Thompson, and the event will come off of pay-per-view and go on to Fox Sports 1. All that was happening, and out of all this, the biggest thing, and Josh Barnett and Ben Rothwell also said they would fight in the main event instead of being in the co-main event of UFC on Fox this coming weekend. So a lot of crazy stuff happened here for UFC 196, and also a small note, reading all this kind of recap here on MMAfighting.com, it'll be the first pay-per-view number-wise to air on cable television in the United States since UFC 138, which was Chris Lieben against Mark Munoz, and I also think that was the first ever non-title 5-round main event as well, I believe as well. So a lot of crazy stuff here for 196, but a lot of hate now is coming towards Fabricio Verdum and all this, and we'll get your thoughts here first, Billy. Let's start first with Fabricio Verdum and then maybe move on to some of the other stuff that happened with this 196 card.
As far as Fabricio goes, I kind of don't blame him in this situation, man. I feel like if you're a little banged up, but you've been training for Cain, you're like, all right, we know our game plan. We beat him before. It's like we can go into this. To get a fresh opponent and you got the, I don't know, I really don't blame him on not taking this on late notice. He doesn't have to go out there and risk his belt. He's a little beat up. It's a whole different game for him in like such a short amount of time when you're beat up. I really don't blame him. It sucks he couldn't fight. But at the same time, I don't send no hate his way. It is how it is, and it plays out. And I mean, if you don't think you can get in there and fight, I don't want you to fight. And yeah, it's just you get a new opponent in 2 weeks. You got to change everything. When you're hurt and you're barely making it to the fight, who says he should?
Yeah, I don't like the way. I'm not throwing any shade at Fabricio, but I don't like the way he went about it. Just because he could have easily just said, hey, look, my opponent changed last minute. I don't really want to do this right now. Let me just wait because honestly, I don't want a fresh new opponent who I haven't even had a camp for, had a completely different camp for a different type of fighter. You know, let's just not do that. And no one would have been mad at him. That makes total sense. Cain could have pulled out. Everyone would have just been mad at Cain like normal. Instead, now he just comes out and says, you know what, my back has been kind of hurt me and stuff and everything. And it just feels like he's like kind of holding out in this injury and decided that Cain was more worthy to step in with rather than Stipe. And it's kind of throwing a diss at Stipe because just like this dude's an up-and-comer. Don't sit here and just write it off like, oh, you know what, I'm injured and everything. I don't want to fight Stipe right now. It's just like Stipe will mess you up. And it's going to be a tough fight. Like you said, though, maybe he didn't want to fight a fresh opponent with an injury and everything. Didn't look good. But then maybe he shouldn't have. He gets cleared with them beforehand. Like if it's a change in contract, He shouldn't have said yes to Stipe and then 24 hours later said, you know what, never mind, I don't want to fight Stipe. He should have just said, I'm injured.
I think that's my biggest issue with it, Colin, is that the UFC had to have notified him before they made the news that Stipe would fill in. I could be wrong, but I highly doubt they just said, no, Stipe fill in for Purdue. We'll have no problem with that.
Right. Yeah.
And just go ahead and release that information on Twitter and all other media outlets.
That's what happened with Jones and Henderson. That's why Jones said no to Chael last minute. It was a change of contract, so they had to bring it up to him. Everyone knew he could have won the Chael fight, but he still said no because it was changing his contract last minute. And it was just, a different thing he could have traded for. And I just feel like that because Stipe it just felt more like an excuse now, because if he would have went and fought Kane and he lost that fight, would he have said, oh, I kind of hurt my back and everything. I kind of waited to pull out, and stuff like, I don't know. I'm not mad at Fabricio. I think he would have beat Kane, but still, it's just like, it kind of left me feeling weird.
To be fair, too, I know you kind of brought up you'd think they would notify him, changing contract, everything. This could be crazy, but I thought I remember it happened to Benson Henderson before, where he said he didn't find out his new opponent until he seen it on Twitter.
Yeah, that did happen. That's true.
I'm not saying you're right. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I think for a main event with a world title on the line, you gotta let the guy know. You can't just not let him know that your opponent's out and it's changed to somebody else. And I think that's why it looks bad, the timing of it. If Fabricio would have waited a week and then goes, oh, you know what? I can't go either. I don't think it looks as bad, to be quite honest. People just go, oh man, like now he's hurt. I don't think. I think the timing issue hurts. I mean, I don't know if he could have waited or whatever, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily ducking Stipe Miocic, because I mean, this guy twice signed on to fight Cain Velasquez in Mexico City.
Oh yeah, no, he just wants to be more prepared
the crowd
for the fight.
Would be against him.
Yeah, he just wants to be prepared.
I don't think he's scared of Stipe or anything, but he definitely didn't want to face Stipe Miocic banged up, because he felt like he was going to lose, and he loses momentum. And him being, as he cited, he's 38 years old. If he loses the title, he'll probably never get back there again, even in a division like heavyweight.
And that's why I gave him credit to where I didn't think it was no matter. I don't think he was ducking him or anything, because obviously, not to diss Stipe, but I do still think Kane is a way tougher opponent. I think most of us would agree. And I just think, you got this fresh guy. It's a whole different game plan. You don't want to go into it banged up. And exactly like you said, the guy's 38. He finally made this run. And I think he's really trying to leave his legacy now. So he has to pick every defense really carefully and do it right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on him and Kane anyway to really come up there and perform, because this division's already on hold a lot because of injuries anyway. This is a heavyweight title fight is now just really big in the UFC just because they don't happen often. But that being said, I don't blame him for not wanting to fight Stipe injured, and I believe that he truly is injured. I just feel like he should have, when he found out Kane was injured, he said, you know what, I'm kind of injured too. Let's just postpone the fight. So
probably. Well, let's get to the other kind of sideshow things. First of all, Josh Burnett, Ben Rothwell thinking they were going to move up to the main event. Honestly, it's a good fight, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's that viable of a main event replacement, because I don't think that all of a sudden was going to be an interim title fight, if that's what they thought it was going to be. And really, if that fight moves off of UFC and Fox, that becomes a pretty bad card, in my opinion. You got a great main event, but then not a whole lot else. And so I never really thought that was going to be moved. Then you add in John Jones. To me, it's kind of a half attempt by John Jones to say he would take this fight, because he's like, oh, I'd take the fight, but it has to be for the real title. There would be no way they would strip Fabricio Verdum and then make it for the real title. That would never happen. To me, this is John Jones trying to save some face in light of, like you said, the Dan Henderson thing, but it was a half-ass attempt in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just a joke. It's just John being John. He's just trolling. There's no way the UFC would strip a champ unwarranted like that. It's Jones. People have been hyping up him possibly moving the heavyweight for so long. He's all the opportunity just to stir up the beans a little and just create some drama.
I really, though, honestly, I'm personally, as a fan, not a big John Jones fan. I respect what he is as a fighter. If he would have done that, he would have won me as a fan over. If he would have stepped up, we've seen great champs before, Anderson Silva. They dipped their toes up in the weight class above, and it obviously wasn't the champion. It was a guy like Stipe. It was a title contender, still a big fight. It would have won me over. I think it would have turned a lot of the hate he got from the Dan Henderson, Chael Sonnen thing. I think it would have been a great move to make for him.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people are thinking that someone like Stipe or Struve would be the warm-up fight for Jones at heavyweight. And I feel like if Stipe wasn't in the position he is now for a title shot, and it was just like a main event, just Stipe and Croatia or something, it would have been more likely to see Jones move up to it just because that's a good warm-up fight and everything. But also, they probably have so much marketing and things ready for Jones's return. I doubt that fight would have even gotten close to being put on the table.
Now, of course, they decided to move the event from pay-per-view to Fox Sports 1. And with them doing this, and I believe I said this the last 2 times they did actually cancel the event, which would have been 151 and 176. Why wouldn't you just move it to free TV? And finally, they did this. Now, however, the difference between this and the other 2 events that got canceled, neither one of those were in Las Vegas. One was in Toronto, and the other were in Los Angeles. So they feel like they don't own those cities a lot as much as they do like their hometown in Vegas. So there was no way they were going to pull out of Las Vegas. And to me, moving it to Fox Sports 1 is a great thing. You're then saying it's a numbered event, but it's not a pay-per-view. There's still some solid fights left on the card. And it really goes to show, like, why should they have ever canceled those other 2 events? Because if you move it to free TV, sure, maybe you refund partially the price of the ticket, because obviously you pay more to attend a pay-per-view event than a fight night. But isn't it always better to refund some of the tickets instead of all of the tickets and refund the venue that you just rented out and waste all those money on promotion and posters and all that stuff and just throw that down the tube, and then instead of just salvaging and saving some face? And I'm really glad they finally did this. I guess it took them 2 canceled events to realize that this is still a viable option to still have an event that fans can watch and go to, even if it's not exactly what they planned, because stuff's going to happen. This is like I said, they already canceled 2 events, and more events like this are probably going to happen in the future. So hopefully this is a good precedent moving forward for the UFC.
Yeah, who knows what their situation was earlier on with Fox and whatnot, and just being able to work it all out too. Like, they could have tried some sort of small attempt to get it done before, but I'm definitely glad they at least saved some of the card. I don't know. They got a good main event out of it still. For a Fox Sports 1 card, you'd be excited for that fight. So I think they did the best they could do in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good look to see how the format's going to play out, as just pulling it over to like free television, because they are trying to slowly make that move, get rid of pay-per-views and get into Fox broadcast, Fox Sports 1. I mean, it's still a decent caliber card. I wouldn't say it's pay-per-view, but I mean, on any other night, Johnny Hendricks is a pay-per-view headliner. If that Lawler fight would have went any differently, he would have been headlining a pay-per-view right now. So it's still a decent fight card. It's just a good way to test the waters, because if they do really decently on views and just watches on Fox Sports 1, I forgot the term for it already. It might kind of warm the UFC up to scaling back on the pay-per-view models, which a lot of people have been clamoring for. So,
where's Benson Henderson at? That dude will fight Stipe. He'll fight anyone, right? He steps up to save the day.
Also on MMA Fighting, just real quickly, going off of Greg Kahilis, he's actually the manager for Stipe Miocic, Jessica Ai, and Randa Marcos. And actually, we know Greg. He's the one I deal with to get Jessica Ai on the show. And obviously, we had Stipe on before his fight against Andre Arlovski, all thanks to Greg. So we kind of know Greg. So it was interesting to see his name pop up in the news here. So he was kind of going off on Verdum a little bit, saying, that wasn't the right thing to do. And he was going on saying, I can say for a fact that John Jones, that fight was never offered to Stipe, and Stipe wasn't offered any other fight, and he never turned down any fight. And it looks as though Fabricio's injury shouldn't be that serious. And Stipe and Fabricio mentioned that they would be open to a Memorial Day fight, which, of course, the UFC almost always has a pay-per-view Memorial Day weekend. Nothing is scheduled. That is seeming to be UFC 199. The only thing with that is, would they then just try to save the heavyweight title for 200 instead of putting it at 199? But it may look as though Stipe gets a shot sooner thanks to the Velasquez injury, even though he won't get it here at February 6th.
So do you think even if it gets pushed back enough, say where Velasquez will be ready to go because of Velasquez's history of injuries and whatnot, this is where Stipe just kind of takes a step over him in line now?
I think so. If they're saying they're ready to go Memorial Day, and Velasquez, I mean, we're talking 4 months isn't a lot he could get healed up, but then rehab. He's been injured before. They may just go, well, we gave you your chance. You didn't really deserve a rematch, and you pulled out of the last time we were in Mexico, and then you lost the next time we went back there. We really don't owe you any favors. So we may see Velasquez take on somebody like an Alistair Overeem or maybe even Orlovsky or somebody else to get back to top contention.
Rightfully so. I mean, I hope Stipe Fabricio gets made just because I feel like Kane doesn't deserve it. I mean, because he pulled out of the last fight that was supposed to happen in November or September, whatever it was. They're supposed to have the rematch last fall, and he pulled out injured and said, I'll be good February for sure. Look what happened. Where are you, Kane? So I'm glad that they're not just deciding, hopefully, to just postpone Kane Fabricio too, and they just go forward and just make Verdum Miocic.
Real quickly, UFC in New York trying to push for an event at Madison Square Garden, going as so far as to book the venue for April, and that was most likely set to be John Jones returning against Daniel Cormier. However, the ruling was today in Albany, and once again, the legislators in the state of New York have denied mixed martial arts in the state, the only state in the country to not have mixed martial arts legalized. And boy,
hang on, which
it could still
is this the
happen,
federal ruling?
But no, this is the state.
Did the state release?
Yeah,
one
the
also?
district court's denial of our motion for a preliminary injunction and its efforts to redirect litigation of the state courts. That is coming from an article on MMAfighting.com written by Luke Thomas, and they were quoting. His last name is Epstein. The UFC COO, Lawrence Epstein. So they're still trying, but obviously that event at Madison Square Garden in April is not going to happen.
Well, because I know there was a decision that came out recently. The UFC did have an appeal to the federal level, and the federal said, no, this is not our place of
right, and that's when it went to the district court.
But I heard the state one wasn't supposed to happen until March.
Well, it said the district court denied the preliminary motion for an injunction, which I think was the original appeal, and then I think they're
I still think there might be a decision in March, because that's just the motion for the injunction itself.
Right, but it would have allowed them to move forward with having the event on the April 29th, and so at least as far as Madison Square Garden goes in April, probably not going to happen.
Yeah,
it could happen in 2016, but it's not going to happen probably until after UFC 200, if anything.
Yeah,
but it's still ridiculous that this one state is not having it. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. I'm not really sure what.
I don't know.
Sounds like it's just old guys stuck in their old ways and grudges.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with actual.
I don't know enough about it anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much talk about the culinary union and everything, but with all that crap going on, I don't even really know what's going on with it where. So I haven't been paying attention too hard.
Let's talk about the UFC 197 pre-fight press conference, which included a lot of great quotes from both main event fighters Conor McGregor and Rafael dos Anjos, including, if you go on MMA Fighting, a nice snub from the lightweight champion to the featherweight champion, not shaking his hand. First of all, I was kind of surprised Conor even put it out there, first of all. And then second of all, couldn't he shake the man's hand? I
thought this was him imitating the El Chapo picture, because if you look at it, there's a famed one where he's wearing that identical shirt and he has his hand out.
Well, I mean,
shaking someone's hand.
Either way,
it didn't seem like McGregor to shake someone's hand. It looks like he's posing right there. He was acting a fool at that press conference.
Well, regardless, he still didn't return the favor.
I think if Artie actually would have went for it, McGregor would have pulled something slick,
It seemed like McGregor was just having fun. It almost reminded me of what Rampage with Jones when he wouldn't look, so he did a little smile and stuff. And it looked like McGregor was just having fun, man.
Yeah, I mean, besides at that moment and everything, I mean, I don't want to come out and say RDA was snubbing him or anything. I mean, yeah, it would make sense because it's McGregor and it's RDA. He's defending his title against this guy talks a bunch of crap, but it just because at the moment right now you're just trying to get up there. You got to come up, take a bunch of pictures. You got to get off stage, do the after, interviews and everything real quick. Just so much going on. You got to be quick, got to pay attention. He probably just wasn't even really focused on the hand. He probably just saw some movement and probably just thought it was a fist. I mean,
he saw it. He didn't do it.
Everyone has their own narrative. I mean, either way, because that's the thing. Like, you're not gonna sit here and like break down the confidence of either guy. Both dudes are pretty confident in themselves. So I feel like even then reading into the handshake too much might not even be anything. I mean, but the thing is, just like, I don't think he's sitting there trying to shake his hand.
Well, let's read into the shirt.
I mean, well,
The
shirt's very
Versace
amazing.
El
The dude's
Chapo
just spending money
shirt
like
that
no
he
one's
was wearing,
business,
and also
so.
the shaved head. Like, it was a bold look. Shaved head, long beard, El Chapo shirt, no belt, sleeves rolled up.
That's what I'm saying, dude. This dude is here just to clown around and have fun. That's what he does.
He's having his fun. If you listen to the conference, I mean, I felt bad for
He looked like he
RDA.
was
I also
tweaking.
felt bad for the graphic designers at the UFC
Oh,
with him with Connor putting him on blast about the poster, how it didn't include Connor's belt. It doesn't say champion versus champion, and the fact that he didn't like how RDA was shaded slightly more in front of McGregor. And also, I'm assuming on the final poster you will see Holm and Tate, but at least on most of the promotion, they're not anywhere to be found either, and that's obviously a really huge fight as well. So he is justified with putting the poster guys on blast.
It's probably just a placeholder. The UFC also released a bunch of those placeholder posters before. We all look kind of like that. And then once they get closer to the event, and they actually hash something out that actually looks good. Then you see things that look better. We'll see. I mean, lately also, though, they've been going for some pretty bland styles.
I feel like they're kind of blowing it on this event. If I wasn't a hardcore fan, they could be advertising champion all over. I feel like it's just not out there. I feel like people that don't really know and they're kind of getting into it just think this is McGregor's next fight.
Especially since the UFC 94 poster, the last time it was champion versus champion, the belts are both proudly displayed on BJ Penn and George St. Pierre, and champion versus champion is proudly displayed on the poster.
I mean,
and if you're thinking, I would say Conor McGregor at this point in time is just as big, if not bigger, than GSP or BJ Penn at that point in time in the UFC.
Right up there.
It doesn't make any sense that it doesn't say champion versus champion and that Conor doesn't have his belt opposite Dos Anjos, regardless of whose belt is for. I mean, they had his belt pictured, albeit you barely see it in the Aldo poster because his hands are up. They have it on his waist, where Aldo has it on his shoulder. But I mean, it's still there.
Well, but the thing is, like with the Aldo one, though, is that he was an interim champ in the same division. And that's the reason the both belts were in those photos, is that when they actually had their fight, they were both champ of the division.
Right. But
this one,
he earned the belt. He should have it on there.
But he's also not coming into the division as a featherweight champ. He's coming into the
BJ
division
Penn?
as a 155 contender. The UFC's not one to follow precedent, though. That's what I'm saying, though. It's like, yeah, they could have been that thing, but this is like 6 years later, 10 years later. Like, let's just look at the situation. I mean, like I said, it probably hasn't been thought out exactly how much they're putting into it. Have you seen any commercials for it?
Exactly. They just because they wouldn't be commercials till 196.
That's what I'm saying. It's like they probably haven't even made a poster or anything for it yet.
Well, they
just had
the
event.
Poster hasn't been printed, but the image
event
for
was
it
just
has.
announced 2 weeks ago too. So I'm saying, like, give it some time. I mean, McGregor is just poking fun at what he can. It's just he's being McGregor.
Here's the thing: they're not going to change it now. The fact he's pointed out the things.
The poster.
Otherwise, they'll give. They'll be like
they'll
they're
change it
giving
now.
in
They're not. There's no.
They're going to change it.
They're
for
business.
Conor.
Maybe they'll change it for 200 when he's on there, but not for this one. All right. Speaking of another guy in the lightweight division that, much like his training partner, AKA, seems to get injured all the time, that being Khabib Nurmagomedov, he is actually set to take on Tony Ferguson. Of course, this was supposed to be the co-main event of the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale in December, but once again, Khabib got hurt. Tony Ferguson was actually slated to rematch Michael Johnson, a fight that I think all of us on this panel didn't really agree with in terms of the rankings, but we get that Tony was looking for some revenge. However, Michael Johnson had to pull out of that fight due to an injury, so Khabib said he's good to go, and it will be targeted for their April on Fox event, so that would be UFC on Fox 19. No destination hasn't been announced, though Florida currently would be the front runner. Now, obviously, they just had a UFC on Fox in Orlando in December, so I'm assuming it wouldn't be Orlando again. So my guess would either be Jacksonville or Miami.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't see where anyone else are really slated to go right now. I mean, we'll see.
Because Miami, they can do it where the Heat play.
I just realized this is way off topic right now. Cain Velasquez injured out. What is Daniel Cormier going to talk about on the pre-fight? All he talks about is how he trains with Cain Velasquez.
They have to talk about how he trains with Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see how this Khabib Ferguson thing's out. I mean, right now, it's still all the way in April. I'm holding out to see if Khabib's knees are holding out a week out from the fight.
Yeah,
so.
this one's hard. I really like this matchup. We probably all agree it's a better matchup than with Johnson right now.
Mhm.
For Ferg, it's a better fight. But not going to get my hopes up. And I feel like for Khabib, this is his last shot. If he didn't show up for this fight, I'm not even looking at him as a normal contender. I think he needs a fight with maybe not even a top 10 fighter before he comes back.
I mean, I'm more interested to see who's going to fill in for Khabib once this gets closer, because let's be real, it just happened to Kane again when we thought that stuff should be done with, and then look, he just injured out. So
Yeah, and yeah, it's hopefully Nate Diaz.
Also, did anyone know there was a World Series of Fighting event this past weekend? Probably didn't, as the main event was Luis Firmino against Carlos Fordor. Yeah, those are the names of the main event for World Series of Fighting 27 at the FedEx Forum, which is a 20,000-seat arena in Memphis, Tennessee.
wow.
Yeah, that and by all accounts, Firmino grinded out Fodor for the main event decision. I couldn't even watch it. I was that, yeah. So if you're wondering, World Series of Fighting somehow is still around. Maybe not for much longer
How
if they
many-
put out events like this.
Over under, how many do they have left? How many events? What's the last World Series of Fighting we see?
30.
I think they only last 3 more events.
I think 3 more events, and then I think.
Well,
they're just
they just announced a full tentative schedule to return on NBC Sports for 2016. So they
gonna-
may last
some
throughout
places
the year.
do that, but then it craps on them. So we'll see.
I don't see him lasting more than 2016. No way. I
We'll
can't
see.
imagine anyone's tuning into that.
Speaking of bad main events, how about Paul Daly taking on a guy by the name of Andy Ulrich for the main event of Bellator 148 this Friday from Fresno, California. Also features such stars as Chris Honeycutt against Paul Bradley, Tony Johnson against Rafael Butler, and actually probably the biggest matchup on the card, Randy Couture's son Ryan Couture against Patricky Pitbull.
How is that not the co-main at least?
I feel like that should be the main event,
It
and
should
being all
be.
honesty. No offense to Paul Daly, but him not taking on Josh Koscheck in a rematch and then taking on some bum who's 11-5 that Paul Daly will scorch
Oh,
in 3 minutes is, and they even did it in his hometown, Koscheck's of Fresno, California. That was the whole point. This was his Bellator debut in his hometown, or his adopted hometown. I think he's originally from outside of Pittsburgh, but he's lived in Fresno for many, many years now. So very, very disappointing here for Bellator. And this event rivals the World Series of Fighting 27. At least they were smart enough not to do it in a 20,000-seat arena.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's brutal. I mean, 'cause I think there's 2 things out of it. First thing is just that, man, I don't know. It says a lot. I mean, Bellator has become more of a freak show thing now. I mean, their biggest stuff that we're all hyped for is like Kimbo and which legend he's going to fight. Or, we got Shamrock Gracie coming up, things like that. Like, I will tune into Bellator to watch those things. Paul Daly, I love the dude, but I'm not going to sit here and watch him starch a nobody. I don't care. It's Paul Daly. It says a lot, though. Kind of relating to what happened with the UFC this week, how they had these names injure out, and yet the UFC had their 2 big names for this pay-per-view coming up in the next 2 weeks injure out, and they still got a pretty decent card going through. This card had 1 dude injure out, and it just went, and the interest went, because I would have loved to see Koscheck.
And it's crazy because this is their first event of the year.
And it just,
You would think this would
and it
be
fizzled out.
somewhat have some good names on it.
It's weird because World Series and Bellator are seeming more and more just like regional leagues instead of like international leagues. Because Bellator is trying to go international this year. They got a couple places set up.
Yep.
But they
4
seem
events this
more
year.
like regional events that you would pay $15 to go drink a beer out in the parking lot with a bunch of teens and then go sit in this place at, where the Whalers play. It's like that's kind of what these events are almost like now. So it's weird.
I think they should almost just scale back the amount of events they're doing, maybe. Or I don't know what it is. They have these tent poles, and they do all right. But besides that, I just don't see much for them. And I don't get it because they have stars. They have guys like Liam McGeary and Michael Venom Page. These guys are just so exciting stars, and they don't shine the red on them. Even Pitbull, stuff like that. I think they put it in the wrong places, and they try and look on these old names like Daly. And I don't know what. It's just a failed plan.
I think a big issue is and I think this is due to the UFC being kind of smart with this. So the UFC has the roster to be really aggressive with how many cards they have. And so for cards like our organizations like World Series and Bellator to stay relevant in the American market, they kind of have to keep putting cards out there even if it's not the best quality, because they got to keep their name up. If Bellator could scale back the number of events they have and put out some really stacked, good, interesting cards, not as often though. That's the problem. Is that like when their name isn't coming up that often and everything, I feel like a lot of it would just kind of, a lot of people like, what happened to Bellator? I haven't seen him in 2 or 3 months. I'm not really following everything. It's just, I don't know. It's a weird market.
But when you get these people like these big, huge Kimbo, Shamrock Gracie, people are gonna tune in.
Keep doing that. I'm loving that
And the
stuff.
thing
I'll
is,
tune in for
they
that.
I think the thing that's disappointing is that they had time to set this event up. Their last event was the first weekend of December.
Yeah.
This is the last weekend in January. So effectively, that's almost like 2 whole months to plan this event. Their debut in 2016, and they come with this card.
Exactly, and that's what's confusing about it. It's just like, why?
And that's the thing, like, there
what
was
was-
no rush. It wasn't like, oh, they had an event 2 weeks ago. This one kind of sucks. No big deal.
Yeah,
If it was that, we'd be like, oh, all right. But that's not the case. They could easily put a title fight on this show and then co-main evented with Daly against Koscheck. And then if Koscheck gets hurt, no big deal because you got a title fight. What happened to that bantamweight title fight we've been talking about for months? You think Dantes and Galvo, that was slated to go months ago, could have easily been put on this card.
Is there like a Spike TV 2 for this?
They just show it all on their website.
Yeah. I mean,
Just go right to YouTube, man. Forget.
straight to YouTube.
Might as well. All right. Well, let's get to this weekend's action. UFC on Fox 18. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Gramm, alongside Billy Brandt and Colin Camper. And we weren't able to get these interviews in time, so if you're watching live, they won't be on the main broadcast. But if you check out our audio version on iTunes as well as the Stitcher app, you'll hear these interviews. And, of course, you'll see them as separate videos popping up later here, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. But we are scheduled to have some big names coming on the show real quickly. We're going to have Michael McDonald, fresh off his win at UFC 195, first fight in a little over 2 years for the UFC. Then we're going to talk to Charles Rosa, fresh off a win at UFC Boston. And then we're going to talk to the guy in the main event of this card here in New Jersey, that being Anthony Rumble Johnson, as he takes on Ryan Bader, where the winner most likely gets a shot at the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. 4 fights will be featured on the main card, but before we get to those main card fights that we break down, decent undercard here. Some decent names: Dustin Ortiz, Wilson Reese, flyweight, Bruce Leroy. He's always an entertaining guy. Also, Rafael Natal will be taking on Kevin Casey.
Randy
Olivier
Brown
Alban
down there.
Mercedes against Carlos Diego Fajeda, and obviously the featured fight on the prelims, which I honestly think should be on the main card. No offense to Alcantara and Jimmy Rivera, but this fight should be on the main card. Tarek Safadine against Jake Ellenberger, and I think that's really pivotal. Both guys have had their losses to the top guys in the division, and a win kind of puts them back and makes them relevant once again in this stacked welterweight division.
Definitely. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen Tarek fight. I think his last fight was getting KO'd Rory Mack.
I
I
believe
think
so.
he was off for a bit and everything, took some soul searching or whatever,
And it's funny because he's now training at TriStar.
which is good. Hey, I think that's really good. I think that shows that he's really had like an open look at everything. Yeah, 2014 right there.
That's
So-
that's
and-
longer than most fans
But I mean,
would
if,
think.
if,
Yeah,
even if you check out his record and everything, like Tarek Safadine, he's a decent fighter. He's not a bad dude. He was making waves for a long time. I think he's still ranked 10 within the top 10. I think I don't remember as well for welterweight. Jake Ellenberger, he's coming off a tough loss, but he's actually been looking pretty good. He's been showing some like he's trying to really kind of make some waves and try and get his stuff together. So either way, this fight's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. It's not going to throw up any crazy contenders. Yeah, as you can see there. Yeah, Jake
he's lost
Ellenberger.
4 out of his last 5. His only win was over the aforementioned beleaguered
Yeah,
Josh Koscheck.
So it's some pretty
UFC
tough losses
184.
for Ellenberger. But then, I mean, if you look at who he's losing against, I mean, they're not bad. I remember the Gastelum fight. There was a lot of talk about him kind of getting a little too crazy.
That was probably the worst one of the 3. Now, he didn't look great against McDonald or Lawler,
right.
but at least, he made an effort. I feel in that fight. In the Gastelum one, something was wrong. And then the Thompson one, he just simply got caught.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be a good fight. It's just another nice fight to get one of these dudes back on the roll. So I'm looking forward to it. But another name I wanted to just kind of throw out there and everything on this card is Randy Brown from are you looking for a fighter? Whatever Dana's doing with the meatball serum, whatever. Randy Brown's debut. I think that's supposed to be a Fight Pass headliner too. So that'll
Yes, it is. Mhm.
So that's a good fight. I'm looking forward to watching Randy Brown fight. I actually liked watching all that take place on Fight Pass. So
Let's get to this main card here, starting first with the matchup now at 170 for Sage Northcutt, moving up to 170 for the first time in his career and also in the UFC, as he will be taking on injury replacement Bryan Barberena, who's also originally listed at 155 out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so both guys agreeing to come up a weight class. So far in the UFC for Barberena, he's 1-1. Again, both fights at 155, defeating Jake Ellenberger's brother, Joe Ellenberger, at UFC on Fox 13, knocking him out. And then most recently lost to Chad Laprise earlier in 2015 at UFC 186, taking on, of course, the superstar, the Super Sage Northcutt here, who's kind of taken the UFC by storm. Interesting that this fight got moved up a weight class, despite both guys fighting the majority of their careers at 155 pounds. I don't think the weight thing will be too much of an issue, but short notice is always tough, and I think Sage Northcutt he's so far been proven that he's a really tough guy to crack, and the one thing Barberena will have going for him is a little bit of actually, no, he won't have a height advantage. I thought Sage was 5'10", but both are actually listed at 6 foot. So that goes out the window.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to have a little bit of a height advantage. So for Barberena, I don't know. I think this is a fight where obviously no one's expecting you to win. You took this fight in short notice, and I say you just go out there and just throw everything at him. I mean, you obviously have some knockout power, winning 8 of your 10 career victories by knockout, and I think that's what you got to do. I think you got to turn this into a brawl and make it ugly, because if you try to go there and make it technical and work a game plan and cut angles, I think Sage Northcutt is very technically sound, and you got to do something that is unorthodox that he won't be prepared for, because I don't think anyone's really brought a fight to him yet. So if you can somehow do that, I think you got a chance of beating him.
yeah, no, this is gonna be a lot of interest in this one. I'm really wondering to see what Northcutt does if he gets a win here. If he feels really comfy at welterweight, he might stay at welterweight. I'm imagining that this is at welterweight just because it was closer to Barberena's walk-around weight, so it was easier for him to just do the cut back down to like 170. So it would be kind of nice because both of these dudes tend to walk around pretty big anyway. So, I mean, we might see Northcutt pull a Ben Henderson and just really like 170 and stay up there. We'll see. I mean, it would be interesting. It'd be a definite surprise and change of pace, because I thought lightweight could use him. But
well, Northcutt's so big and he's so young. I think he will end up fighting his prime years at 170. I mean, he's 19. He's probably going to fight 170 a lot in the future. This fight, it's keys to beating Sage. It's just pressure, man. You got, like you said, you got to keep it dirty. If you give Sage a space, we've seen time and time again, he's solid with his striking. You can't. You just got to make it dirty, stay in his face, mix in your wrestling. We've seen him get taken down. It's able to happen. And that's the keys to getting at Sage. It's really more of, is he the superstar we all think he is? Can he keep the streak going? And if he wins this fight, do you think he gets an actual name at this point?
I think if he does something super, super crazy impressive at 170, just comes out stunning first-round knockout.
This would be 3 in a row, right?
If he wins.
Yeah, 3 in a row. Honestly, you could probably give him the loser.
3 in a row in about like 3 months, because he fought October, December, and now January.
I mean, you could either give him a rough name like Eric Silva at welterweight. If he wants to go back down the lightweight, there's some names out there like outliers you can give him. If he does really, really impressive and blows minds and he wants to stay welterweight, I could see the argument made that if Ellenberger loses, he could get Ellenberger, because Ellenberger's would be on like a 5-1 or 1-5 skid then. 1-6 even. Yeah, if Ellenberger loses, he'd be on a 1-6 skid. I mean, it's a big step up, but then, it was a step up for Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, he took that fight and everything. So there's a lot you could do with him. I like just the fact that he's more than willing to move to welterweight, because it just shows he's willing to bounce between weight classes and take a fight.
The way he's been fighting and how fast he's been getting finishes, I feel like if he gets a good win here, we'll see him on UFC 200 somewhere.
Oh, definitely.
I think he's the kid to put on there.
Definitely on there.
And
at least headlining like Fight Pass or something.
Yeah, what kind of name he would get, or if he could.
All right, let's get to the next fight of the evening, which would be in the bantamweight division, as Jimmy Rivera takes on early Alcantara. Alcantara's been one of those guys who's kind of beaten the lower guys of the bantamweight division, but when he's taken on towards the elite, he's fallen just a bit short. Not getting dominated, just hasn't done enough to get victories, losing to the guys like Hakron Diaz, Uriah Faber, and Frankie Saenz. He does have a couple of big victories in his career, beating Francisco Trinaldo, which is crazy considering Trinaldo has fought at 185 pounds in some instances. He did knock out Ricardo Lamas back in the WEC. He does have a win over Michihiro Omagawa, which is also a big win as well. But now, 35 years old, he's still good, but I don't think he'll be able to make a run, and taking on a guy kind of the opposite, upstart from New Jersey and Jimmy Rivera. While 18-1, 12 of his 18 career victories are by decisions, though as of late, he's been kind of on a roll. If you look at his last 4 fights, now only one of these were in the UFC. However, he's beaten some close to UFC caliber names, including Carson Beebe, Marcus Brimage, knocking out both those gentlemen in the first round, then taking on former RFA champion Pedro Munoz and beating him in his UFC debut back in November at UFC Fight Night 77. So this Rivera looks like he has some skills, but it's really tough to out-decision Alcantara. He's one of those guys that is very tough, and for Rivera, this is a chance at the big time, but I think it might be a little too soon for him to take on a guy of this caliber, and I think he'll be in a little bit of a rude awakening there in his home state of New Jersey.
Yeah, I think the biggest factor in this one is just going to be experience and who's been in there with the names. Alcantara being in there with such names and being around so long, and you got a guy like Rivera who he's not coming out here finishing guys like crazy. I know of recently he's got his KOs, but if you're going to go to a decision against a real experienced guy like Alcantara, it's going to be a rough night for you.
I think it's going to be interesting. I remember watching this Brimage fight, and actually I was really impressed by it, because I like Marcus Brimage and everything. I was hoping he would have won, but Rivera looked really good. He looked like he could really control the pace of the fight, and I think that's what a lot of those decisions say, is that he's really apt at deciding where he wants things to take place. If he wants to let it go to a decision, then he'll grind it out to a decision and probably just play the point game. Which, if he starts getting tagged early from Alcantara, which it may happen, he might just start playing the defensive fighter and just, work on sticking in, sticking out, and just trying to play that game. We'll see, because honestly, Alcantara is a pretty brutal guy. He's been around for a long time. I mean, you can even just look at his record and just tell he's got some experience on him. I think it's a good test. Like you said, though, Jim, I don't see Alcantara going up making waves anywhere, trying to pull anything top 10 even. Jimmy Rivera, though, I mean, if he gets a strong win here, though, I mean, that just, records like this and everything, and guys who can knock dudes out and just have a strong ability to just dictate what's going on, they can really start surging quick, especially in the current bantamweight division that we have.
I want to make a small correction. His fight against Brimage was in the UFC, so he's actually 2-0. So I want to stand corrected that his debut was not against Pedro Munoz. That was, in fact, his second fight in the UFC. All right, moving to the co-main events of the evening in the heavyweight division, Josh Barnett against Ben Rothwell, 2 longtime veterans of the division. Barnett 34-7, Rothwell 35-9. Both guys are in their late 30s. Rothwell at 34, Barnett at 38, the former UFC champion and obviously legend of Pride. Rothwell kind of went a more beleaguered route through the IFL and actually Affliction at one point before finally getting to the UFC in 2009. After a very kind of mediocre start to his UFC career, going 2-3, since 2013, he is on a 3-fight winning streak with 3 straight finishes as he knocked out Brandon Vera and Alistair Overeem, and then he submitted Matt Mitrione in June of last year in the first round. So he's looked really good, kind of a career resurgence as he took kind of some time off between his win against Vera and then the fight against Alistair Overeem. Kind of really have seemed to revive the veteran from Wisconsin. And looking at Josh Barnett, since returning to the UFC from Strikeforce in 2013, just 3 fights, had a long time between the loss against Travis Brown in December 2013 before he stepped back, going to kind of familiar territory in Japan and defeated Roy Nelson in an absolute 25-minute war there at UFC Fight Night 75. And with that win, Josh Barnett has kind of jumped back into relevance in the heavyweight division, and much like I said, Rothwell. And a winner could very well factor into the title picture, especially now with Cain Velasquez being out of the picture for some time, but more likely probably a matchup with Alistar Overeem awaits the winner to solidify a number one contender chance. And looking at this fight, Ben Rothwell, I think, has to keep it standing. I think his stand-up is probably his best area to win. Josh Barnett's good, but he's better in the clinch with dirty boxing. And obviously, I think if it gets to the ground, Josh Barnett is a submission master. I mean, 20 submission wins of his 34 victories. That's what he's really good at, that catch wrestling. And he's good from the top or the bottom. He's caught many guys from both positions. And I really don't think Rothwell wants to mess with that. And even though this is a 15-minute fight, got to give the edge in conditioning to Josh Barnett. I mean, I thought he did great over the 25 minutes, just throwing everything but the kitchen sink at Roy Nelson. And Ben Rothwell, for the majority of his UFC career, has showed pretty bad conditioning. And even though he's won his last 3 fights, like I said, those were all finishes. He's not going deep into those fights. The last time his fight went to 3 rounds in terms of decision was back in 2011. That was against Mark Hunt, and that was one of the worst fights you'll ever see, his fight against Mark Hunt at UFC 135. So if it goes into the 3rd round, you got to give the edge to Josh Barnett. But I think Ben Rothwell has his work cut out for him, but I actually think he has a better chance to win than if he had to take on Stipe Miocic back in October in Dublin.
Yeah, this one, it's tough for me, but I'm just going to say it. It's really hard for me to get excited for it. As much as I like both guys, when you look at the top of this heavyweight division, it just doesn't excite me. I don't see neither of them really competing for that anymore. But as far as to break down this fight, like, it's kind of exactly like you said. Rothwell, I think, wants nothing to do with Barnett's submission game, his catch wrestling. We've all seen it. It's tried and true. And then I'd want to say his best, I think, I can't think of his name, but Rothwell, he's going to be in trouble in all areas of this fight. In the stand-up, I would normally give him the edge, maybe the younger, fresher, little knockout power, but in that Roy Nelson fight, man, Barnett really looked improved. He really looked sharp. The output for a heavyweight was fantastic. I mean, just all over the place. So I really like Barnett in this fight. I'm kind of just giving a pick, but I really think everywhere this fight goes, Barnett's going to look good. He looked fresh. Maybe that time off in a couple of years really did it for him, but I really like him in this fight.
Yeah, Barnett did look really good in the Nelson fight, and I was pretty happy with that because I like Barnett. You know, he's a good classic fighter. But being said, Ben Rothwell's shown a lot of improvement. I think he's shown that he's actually can really kind of bait some folks with his stand-up and really get the counter going. Ben Rothwell, I'm the exact opposite. This fight actually really excites me because, honestly, the winner here, we can probably see moving up to get really close to almost being a fight away from a title contention or even a title fight. I mean, because honestly, outside of Overeem, who's really, our title contenders? Frank Mir, not really. Arlovsky, gone, unfortunately. That's the thing. JDS just got KO'd. The Rothwell-Barnett winner is a pretty big fight. I mean, and honestly, I would like to see Rothwell-Barnett fight either Overeem or Kane, or, maybe even one of them go up and fight a JDS or Arlovsky. It's a big fight. I'm actually pretty excited for it because stylistically, Barnett on paper should just run through, but for some reason, Ben Rothwell is a freak and just does some weird stuff, and he makes things happen in the octagon. And he's had only some pretty legitimate losses. Mark Hunt, Gonzaga. When Gonzaga first came back, Gonzaga was kind of on a tear for a second. We had Kane, which was like his first fight in the UFC, and Arlovsky. Those are like his big losses. I mean, other than that, he went toe to toe with Roy Nelson, Travis Fulton. I mean, even back Krzysztof Szuzinski in 2006. Szuzinski in 2006 was a killer.
He actually beat him twice.
Yeah,
in 2006 and then in
a
2007.
Yeah,
knocked him out in the first round both times.
Ben Rothwell is a decently good fighter. It's just the problem is stylistically in the division he's in, he's not well rounded enough to pull the wins, and that's where I think the issue may come with Barnett. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think what does for me a heavyweight, kind of to get into this, is I feel like there's just this huge gap between Kane and Verdum and then everyone else. I mean, JDS kind of was there, but I don't think JDS looks the same. But I think there's just a couple guys that are at a different level than the rest of them. And it kind of kills the heavyweight division for me right now.
I mean, I can see it's kind of like women's bantamweight almost right now and everything. We got like 3 legit fighters, and then so
Let's get to the main event of the evening: Anthony Johnson against Ryan Bader. Don't have to go really technical on this one. It's pretty much if Ryan Bader can get out of the first round, he has a great chance to win because I think he has the better conditioning of the two. But Anthony Johnson is just an absolute freak of nature and just brings absolute unbridled power. And Ryan Bader, don't get me wrong, he has some power too, but not the way Anthony Johnson does. And if Ryan Bader can't weather the early storm of Rumble, then the fight's over. It's over quickly, and it's over in devastating fashion. But if Bader can somehow use some good footwork, tie him up, outwork him, and be able to take a punch, he might be able to get a victory and secure himself his much long-awaited shot at the light heavyweight championship.
I mean, I don't want to break this fight down at all. It's like you said. I think Johnson just comes out there, steamrolls him. And I'm kind of even saying, normally I think he had bad conditioning, but it depends how he shows up, man. When he showed up in that Phil Davis fight, it looked great. He was conditioned good. I think Bader has to – it's hard to take him down, but you got to find a way to take him down. Cormier did it. You can do it. Maybe you wait till the later rounds, but it's just, yeah, that first round, man. Johnson is going to hit you. He showed time and time again. He doesn't have to hit you clean. He doesn't have to – if he gets his hands on you, you've seen what he did to Cormier. He caught the top of his head. Dude went across the ring. I mean, that was one of the hardest punches I've ever seen. I don't know how Cormier is even alive to this day and came back to win that fight, but it's insane what Johnson is. I don't know how to break it down technically. I don't think he does anything specific. He's just a monster. And for Bader, after that Rashad fight, it doesn't show a lot of hope for him.
And also, just fun fact real quick before we get to your point, Colin, all of Bader's losses have been by finish. 2 knockouts and 2 submissions.
I was just about to say that, yeah. This is interesting. I feel like for Bader, this is do or die. It's either he gets the win here or he ends up just like Phil Davis and he's just gone on the next cut list. He's not the most exciting fighter. He's been pulling up a decent string of wins. Definitely, the guys he's been fighting, good wins. It's not the most exciting thing. And I mean, personally, he's just not my flavor of fighter. Not that I hate decision fighters, but just the way Ryan Bader does it, it's not terribly exciting. Excitement aside, because we all know Anthony Johnson and the excitement he brings. Stylistically, he can definitely weather the storm, hopefully, of Anthony Johnson. If he does that, I think his cardio holds out for him pretty well. As we saw with Johnson, his is kind of tanked out in the DC fight. He just kind of went away pretty quick, and he just got subbed early. I think if Bader can definitely withstand any first initial flurries and wait for Johnson to get tired and probably make a mistake, I think Bader's wrestling will just let him capitalize really quick and hard on him. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised even if Johnson gets taken out in the first round, probably by just like a blast double or something. Like Bader, the thing with this is like he needs to come out and just put some pressure on Johnson, and he's either not get caught and not get knocked out and take it right to the ground immediately, or wait for Johnson to get tired and just start going for the legs. I mean, even if he pulls a single, I mean, he could just crawl up the back of Johnson, I think, with no problem, just submit him. But then, like we've been saying about Rumble, it takes one punch and you go flying across the octagon. So,
with that said, let's get to picks. UFC on Fox 18, better known as UFC New Jersey. 4 fights on the main card, starting first in the welterweight division as Super Sage Northcutt takes on Brian Barberena. No offense to Barberena, I think he actually has a chance in this fight despite the short notice, but I got to go with Super Sage Northcutt in this one.
Yeah, Sage Northcutt's on a roll. I think he gets one more big win at least before anything puts him in danger.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on that one. No question here.
In the bantamweight division, Ori Alcantara against Jimmy Rivera. Jimmy Rivera looks like a really promising prospect here for the bantamweight division, but I think it's maybe a little too soon to take on a guy the caliber of Alcantara. So give me the Brazilian in this matchup.
Yeah, Alcantara's tried and tested. He's been there. Experience wins this one.
I think Rivera's going to definitely pull this one off pretty more surprisingly than most think.
Co-main events of the evening, heavyweight division, Josh Barnett against Ben Rothwell. even though Rothwell has been on a streak as of late, I just don't see any area he's better at than Josh Barnett. So give me the War Master for the win.
Yeah, Josh Barnett. I think Josh Barnett finishes him in the second.
I think Ben Rothwell is going to pull this one off. Probably a lot quicker than everyone else thinks. Again, first round, my pick, Rothwell.
Anthony Rumble Johnson against Ryan Darth Bader for the main event in the light heavyweight division, with most likely the winner getting a shot at the UFC light heavyweight championship. And I'm going with Rumble Johnson. Ryan Bader can win this fight, but I just think Johnson will be able to get to him before his conditioning fails him. So give me Rumble Johnson.
I think Rumble Johnson knocks him out in under a minute. And hopefully, I don't know if this division's too backed up, but I want to see him fight Jones forever. And hopefully that's the fight we eventually get.
I really want Johnson to win because I really want to see him fight Jones. But I think a lot of fans are going to be sort of disappointed because I think Bader's probably just going to grind this out and just win it either early or just take the decision.
All right, he is Colin Camper, running our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. He is Billy Brandt. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrandt21. And I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Thank you once again for listening. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we'll have the links down below and also on our audio version of the show to my interview with Anthony Rumble Johnson, Charles Rosa, and Michael McDonald. So you'll see the links down below in the show description. So for Colin and Billy, I am Jim Graham, and thank you once again for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.